Welcome back, everybody, to the Caring for the Veteran Caregiver Conference. We are at our last session. So if you've joined us up until this point, thank you. For anyone who is just now tuning in and joining us, I'm Candace Christensen. I'm the coordinator for the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida. For the very last time, I want to go over a few brief housekeeping items. First off, the session is being recorded, so it's going to be posted to our website probably by the end of next week. And if you could leave your cameras off and your microphones off just to limit distractions, that would be great. You can turn on speaker view in the top right corner of your Zoom screen, and that'll make it a little bit easier to see the speaker during the session. We are utilizing the chat box feature for questions. If you have any questions or any comments, just put it into the chat and I will make sure that we cover it. And then lastly, it has not happened yet, but hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties. If we do, we're going to resolve it as quickly as we can and get through it. So introducing our very last session of the conference is Carrie Eyre. Carrie is the program coordinator for social responsibility at Baptist Health here in Jacksonville, and she's the secretary of the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida. So hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Candace. Hi, everyone. So as Candace mentioned, my name is Carrie Eyre, and it is my great privilege to serve as the secretary for the executive committee of the Caregiver Coalition. And I get to work with all these folks who have brought us this conference today. And then my primary role is with the Social Responsibility Office at Baptist Health. We are a small but mighty team within the health system that is focused on the health of the whole community. So Baptist Health really looks at championing and caring for caregivers as part of our mission. This veterans event is always very helpful and meaningful to me especially, and I'm just so grateful for a chance to be a part of this event and acknowledge all of your sacrifices and have a moment to express some gratitude to our veterans and all of you who are caring for them. So as you have heard many times, laughter is the best medicine, and perhaps no one ever needed it more than a caregiver in 2020. So our next speaker is going to take us up a bit and offer us that precious gift of laughter. He's already had us laughing in our sound check. Peter Rosenberger is an author and nationally syndicated radio show host of Hope for the Caregiver, and he has cared for his wife, Gracie, for over 34 years. And together, they've been able to bring hope and contagious inspiration to lighten the weary hearts of caregivers all over the country. Peter is joining us today all the way from Montana to close out our Caring for the Veteran Caregiver Conference with some humor and a lot of insight into the joys and struggles of caregiving. So Peter, thank you for joining us. Welcome. The Zoom floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Carrie. Thank you, Candace, for all the work that you've done on this. Thank you to my elder source, the whole team that everybody's been putting this together. So I do thank you for that. You know, what does it feel like to be a caregiver? It's like coming to a road, looking both ways, and then getting hit by a plane. And that's our journey as caregivers. We are often caught unawares, flat-footed, surprised, the whole thing. And as I kind of hit this milestone in my life, I'm now in my 35th year as a caregiver. That's a long time. And I've thought about this a lot. What do I offer that others may not be able to? And yeah, we talk a lot about humor. I do a lot of things that are kind of goofy and funny and so forth. Humor's been a big part of my life since I've grew up. I grew up in the South. You may not be able to tell that by my accent, but I grew up in South Carolina in a large family. When you have a family full of boys, I'm one of 5 boys and my baby sister, and my mother comes from Irish stock. Dad doesn't have much of a sense of humor, but he likes to be around people that do. But we spoke fluent sarcasm in our home. I mean, we were loud, boisterous, and everything else. And it took a while for me to understand that it was okay to be funny and okay to have fun while being a caregiver through a medical nightmare. Now, just as a backdrop, my wife has had, now that I can count, 80 surgeries. 80 that I can count. Both of her legs are amputated. She's been treated by over 100 doctors in 12 different hospitals, and 7 different insurance companies have shouldered, it's hard to keep count of it, but at least 11 million now. And then of course my copays and deductibles and it's an insane journey that we've been on, and it hasn't ever plateaued. We don't get to this place where we say, okay, we've done with this, and now this is what it's going to be like for whatever. Every week there's always some kind of new issue. She was the first person in our county out here to get the coronavirus, and we moved out here from Nashville a little over a year ago. We've been coming out here for 30 years, and I was on the phone with a friend, and I said, Gracie got the coronavirus, and they looked at me. I mean, they through the phone, and we were talking. It was on FaceTime, and they said, "How? What'd you get it from? An elk? I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere." But we had to go to a prosthetic appointment in a neighboring town. That's a pretty good sized town, and we think that's where she got it. So, and I remember the nurse called up here, and she said, "We need to see you down here. Do you have a mask?" And I said, "Well, I've got a Darth Vader mask, but that's kind of personal, don't you think?" And even Gracie, with almost 103 fever, was able to chuckle about that one. The nurse did too. She just didn't want to admit it. How do we do this? How do we laugh? How do we learn to keep a lighter heart? Every one of you all, and I mean, by the way, this is not corona. This is hay fever in Montana. And I start talking like Bill Clinton. Don't be surprised. But every one of you all that have served as any type of caregiver understand that we got tears aplenty. We're not going to run out of tears. But do we have joy? Can our hearts be a little lighter in the midst of this? I was at Walter Reed. Grace and I used to go at the beginning when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. Several folks asked us to go up at Walter Reed, and as a double amputee and as a woman, they really wanted Gracie to get up there and speak to these women who were coming back as amputees. First time we've really kind of dealt with that as a country, where women of any number were coming back as amputees. So Gracie and I went up there. We're in the PT room, and this is one of the many visits we went. And I was talking to a guy who was missing both legs above the knee, banged up pretty hard, and he was laughing and cutting up and telling jokes. And then I looked at him pretty directly, and I said, "How are things back home?" And he clouded up, and he said, I don't think we're going to make it. Our marriage is going to make it." I was talking to another woman, and her son was there. He had a halo around his head. One leg was gone. The other one, I didn't have a lot of hope for. And I said, "Where's his dad?" And the mother, her face just clouded over. And she said, "He's gone, and good riddance." And this is, caregiving is hard on a relationship. It's hard on a family. It's hard on a community. It's hard every kind of way it can be. And if it drags on any length of time, it will take us into some dark places. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt. I'm only 30. Look what it did to me. Don't let this happen to somebody you love. This is my natural hair color. It's Arctic blonde. I call it Arctic blonde. But Gracie at the same time was over there talking to a soldier. She walked over there, and this soldier was laying on a physical therapy table. And he was working out with a physical therapist at the foot there. He had missing one leg. Turns out he had been shot in friendly fire, lost his leg in friendly fire. In his mind, he lost his leg not for his country, but because of his country. And he was pretty bitter about it. But Gracie didn't know all that. She just walked over and said, "How are you doing?" And he was so ugly to her. He just snarled at her. And the physical therapist felt kind of embarrassed. They knew who Gracie was, and they felt kind of embarrassed for her and so forth. And he said to the soldier, he said, "You might want to listen to her." And he was just swearing, and, "There's nothing I want to hear from her about it." And Gracie kind of caught her breath for a minute, and then she was wearing a skirt, and she wears her legs uncovered. They're real robotic legs. I call her Terminator legs. And they are, pretty cool high-tech componentry. She held on to one of the bars, and she propped her foot right beside his head, her prosthetic foot, wearing a really good-looking shoe, by the way, because I buy her shoes. I take one of her legs to the shoe store. I really do this. And I try them on, and then I video conference with her so she can see if she likes the shoes or not. But it's so much easier to take her leg to the shoe store than it is to take her to the shoe store. The sales clerk usually they break down, they get some therapy. Some of them turn to drugs and alcohol, but it works for me. But she was wearing a beautiful shoe. And she looked straight in this soldier's eyes and she said, "You're not the only amputee in here, big fella." And he looked over and he saw this prosthetic foot right beside his head. And then he looked down from the table and he could see she was balancing on another prosthetic foot. And the soldier at him at that point manned up and said, "Okay." And they were able to have a meaningful conversation. What did she provide in that point that I have sought to provide to those other families that I was talking to, those other caregivers, and all the folks that I try to do with my radio show forth? And I think the key is perspective. And you've got to kind of walk through some of these things for some level of time to gain the perspective to allow you to kind of process some of these things out. It takes a long time. And we need to have folks who have kind of weathered through some of these storms to come along and say to us, "You know, this is really painful. And I respect the amount of pain that you're in. And you're going to be okay." This is what I do. And I remember when I first started my show, Jeff Foxworthy told me, "Make them laugh, Peter. You know more than most how painful this is. And they need to laugh. They need to have that pressure valve release of laughter." Well, I didn't start off this journey laughter. In fact, my sense of humor took a beating as well as everything else in my life. And I used humor, used to use it as a defense mechanism. Then I used it as a weapon with a sarcastic tongue. And I don't know how many of you all raise a hand here. You don't have to log in for this. Have ever used your sharp tongue to inflict other wounds? Been there, done that. I mean, I'm the crash test dummy of caregivers. If you could fail at it, I've failed at it. But here are some things that I've learned through this perspective, that you can't use a lot of comedy as in a healthy manner until you've worked through some of these issues and recognized, oh, it's okay. I mean, think about it. I'm in my 35th year of this. How long do I need to be morose and crying before I see something that's beautiful? How long must I hang on to misery before I start grabbing a hold of joy? And these are important questions to ask as caregivers. We live with very, very tough circumstances. And it's hard to watch somebody suffer. But once you somehow get that permission, give that permission to yourself, and somebody maybe helps you have that permission to lighten up a little bit, you realize that it's not all up to you. That's one of the landmines in my book, 7 Caregiver Landmines, thinking that it's all up to me. But it's not. And I didn't cause this to my wife, and I can't undo it. She had her wreck before I ever met her. Most of the surgeries and all that stuff has been under my watch, but I didn't do this, and I don't have the power to undo it. I'm not any kind of physician. I'm a musician. Now, sometimes I get called Dr. Rosenberger, and I tell them I'm a cranioproctologist, and that means I help people get their heads out of the, well, you know. But I don't have the power to change this, but I do have the power to be miserable in it, or I have the power to be joyful in it. And Gracie and I have worked through that together, where we realize that, you know, it's okay. We're going to live life. We're going to have children. We have grandchildren now. I know I don't look old enough to have a grandchild, but I have 3 now. We just had one last week. Well, we didn't have it. I really had actually nothing to do with it, but I'm very grateful because I'm looking forward to seeing her when we get back east here. But it's we do music together. My wife's a no kidding singer. I mean, and you don't take my word for it, Google her. But she's an amazing singer, and we do music together. And I realized, you know, I don't have to throw the football like Peyton Manning in order to be able to throw the football with my kids and have a good time. We're limited as caregivers. And so we started having a good time. And I remember I was on the Today Show with Kathy Lee Gifford, and she said, I don't know why she said it. She was trying to be cute, but she knew that we were kind of raucous. And she said, well, you know, I guess you're not a leg man. And, you know, anybody else probably would have just kind of like, you know, but I said, of course I am. She pops those suckers off every night and says, knock yourself out, big boy. I'm going to bed. Well, Kathy Lee didn't know how to respond to that. So I thought that was kind of funny. And those are the kind of things you realize you have that, oh, okay, this is going to be okay. I was, when Gracie had her 80th surgery, her 80th, 80, that I can count. That's not all the smaller procedures, that's about 150 or so of those things. And we were at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. And we get on this large elevator. It was filled with people. Now, she had her arm in a sling. They had to release a nerve on her elbow because it was pinching and her hand was going numb. And that's a significant surgery anyway. But when you're a double amputee, it makes it kind of hard if you're down to just one arm. And so I helped her get dressed up there in the recovery room, and she's wearing a beautiful dress that goes down below her knees a bit, but it still shows her prosthetic legs. And again, Gracie's a beautiful woman, but I wheel her into the elevator, and she's got her arm in a sling. Her legs are robotic looking, peeking out from underneath the hem of her skirt. And the elevator is filled with people. And this was a big elevator. I mean, I think they like bring cars into this thing. And everybody was just staring at her. And they weren't even being shy or coy about it. They just kept blatantly staring. And finally, I kind of had enough. And I said very loudly, "Worst hysterectomy ever." And they didn't know what to do. They all started looking at their shoes. And Gracie just kind of looked up at me, just kind of rolled her eyes. And as I'm leaving the elevator, backing off, and I shot out over my shoulder, I turned around and I said, "She put up a fight, God love her." And, and she started laughing. She laughed all the way to the car. Now, if you make a woman laugh like that on the day of her 80th surgery, that's a pretty good day's work. And I'm not trying to be snarky or anything else. I think I just want to just have a good time. Just have a good time. We were out here once, and we got her on a horse. This some years ago, and at the time she was wearing prosthesis that had little buttons on either side of the inner calf of it. That's how you release it. They had a pin lock system. And she's wearing straight leg jeans, and she's riding this horse, and her legs kind of flapped against it, and it popped the legs off, but the legs dropped, but they got stuck in the jeans. And they're beating the horse, and the horse is just running for all he's worth, and she's screaming and everything else. And our oldest son and I raced after her on our horses, and we got them, and we took care of it. And she couldn't take her clothes off to put the legs back on because of the jeans, and I was able to just kind of wrestle them out of the jeans. And I'm holding the reins to her horse, and carrying one of her legs, and then our son had the other leg, and he put it in the rifle boot of the scabbard of the saddle there. And he was grumbling and being snarky the whole way back, said, "Mom shouldn't be doing this," and all this kind of stuff. But the point is, that's our family's life. And we just learn to just accept that we're going to have mishaps along the way. Perspective is a wonderful thing, but it takes a lot of tears, and it takes somebody reaching into the heartache you have that has some skin in the game and has some credibility, and letting you know it's going to be okay. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the ending you want to have. And that's something that we as caregivers can learn to accept, is that this may not resolve the way we want it to. And as a musician, there's a thing in music called 2-5-1. Okay, the 2-chord, minor 2-chord, the 5-chord, and the 1-chord, and it resolves like this. I thought I'd do a visual demonstration here. So you got, and everybody knows what that's supposed to resolve to. I mean, your ear is prepared. Your ear is prepared to receive that. But you can substitute other chords in there, and it's not going to resolve the way you want. But it doesn't mean it's not beautiful. And then you start seeing and you start substituting things in, and you start seeing that the song is going to go in maybe a place that you didn't expect. That doesn't mean it's not beautiful. It doesn't mean there's not joy. It doesn't mean there's not excitement. And it doesn't mean there's not laughter. It's okay. And I think it's healthy for us as caregivers to learn how to express these things in a way that makes sense to us. I speak fluent caregiver. And when I do my show, when I write my books, when I come to a conference like this, anywhere I go, my goal is to be able to equip caregivers with the language and the vocabulary and the and hopefully the courage to trust that, okay, maybe I can breathe a little bit easier. Maybe I can let that out a little bit. Maybe I let my shoulders rise just a little bit more. I can't fight this battle. I can't fight amputation, but I can fight being a jerk. I can't fight chronic pain, but I can fight having a lousy attitude. And these are things that I've had to learn the hard way over a lifetime of being a caregiver. And I thought this might be a little bit helpful for you all today. And they were very gracious to ask me to come and just kind of in the seminar today with a little bit of a lighter note and let you know that it's painful. It is. It really is. And I appreciate the magnitude of what each of you are shouldering. And my goal, my passion is to help lighten your heart just a little bit so that you can carry this a little bit easier, so that it doesn't take you into those dark places that you feel so alone that you're having those late night conversations with the ceiling fan. And that's why I'm here. I thought I'd leave you with a couple of you might be a caregiver if. I went to Jeff Foxworthy and I asked him, I said, hey, you want to do this thing with me? AARP was doing an interview with me some years ago. It's been a while. And they said, well, what about those people who don't necessarily consider themselves a caregiver? And what do you say to them? And for whatever reason, that struck me as funny. And I said, if you have a professional carpet cleaner on retainer, you're probably a caregiver. And I'm just imitating Jeff on that. And they started laughing. They thought, well, that's kind of funny. Why don't you and Jeff do something like that? And I called him up and I said, we've been friends for a long time. And I said, you want to do this with me? He said, sure, write out some jokes. And I said, these aren't jokes. This is my life that you're talking about. So I'll give you a couple of them right now. Is that all right? Would that be okay? I can't see any audience, so I'm just assuming that you're nodding your head, or you've nodded off, or you just left. You've shut down Zoom. You've just said, we're had it with this guy. He's just, never mind. All right. If you get more than 6 Christmas cards from doctors, you're probably a caregiver. If you've ever hooked up your dog to your wife's wheelchair, you're probably a caregiver. And I actually did this just to see if it would work. And I did that. If a hospital bed has never hampered your love life, $80 surgeries. We've been in the hospital a lot, and there's no use wasting a semi-private room. And if while at the grocery store, you're the one that's asking for a price check on suppositories, you're probably a caregiver. And here's one, as we get ready to head into the fall season. If you've ever changed a dressing while cooking a turkey with dressing, you might just be a caregiver. So I wanted to give you a couple of those. And then before I close up anything else, I want to also open it up to see if there's any questions. I don't know how to moderate this, Candace, so I'm going to lean on you for that. Do we have any comments, questions, anything you want to ask? It doesn't matter. No math, but anything you got in your heart to ask.
Well, Peter, I had somebody ask, as a caregiver, and I think that you're the best person to ask this to, caring for your wife and having kids and now grandkids. As a caregiver, when you are caring for somebody 24/7, how do you find time just for you? How do you find time for yourself?
I don't find it. I make it. It's intentional. It's deliberate. And we're not going to be able to punch our clock and say, okay, I'm going to take off next Thursday. It doesn't work that way. But I can take off a couple hours. And one of the things I like to do while I'm out here, I just go saddle up. Churchill used to say, there's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man. And I'd like to do that. Or just so sit at the piano and work out the kinks of my soul through that. But if you try to carry these things and keep them bottled up, you won't be able to function. You can't. And sometimes the laughter won't come until you've had enough tears to process out healthily. And I'm not talking about tears of rage and despair. Those aren't healthy tears. I'm talking about tears of healthy tears, because it is important to mourn and grieve. But we have to be intentional about all these things. We don't accidentally rest. We have to intentionally rest. Even when caregivers get time off, I have found through experience and through the vast amount of caregivers I've talked to, that we don't know what to do with the free time. We sit there just trembling because we don't know how to be still. And I've learned if you don't take time for stillness, you're going to have time for illness. So it is an intentional to rest on this. And rest is not sleep. We'll all fall asleep eventually, but rest is something different. And that's where we get very specific and intentional as caregivers. Can we intentionally take a few moments to read a book, paint a picture, write a poem, sit at the piano, play the guitar, garden, something, even if it's for an hour? And that's all we get. That's an hour we have. And sometimes you have to work up to the hour. But that's just the way it is. And if you wait to have it ideally, you won't have it at all. So let's take it incrementally, but let's do it intentionally. Does that answer your question, Candace?
I think you answered it beautifully. I think it was great. Well, Peter, we have probably about 4.5 minutes here, and everything that I have in the chat is very encouraging. It's very, understanding where you're coming from. Not a lot of questions, because I think you're pretty clear.
I speak fluent caregiver.
Yeah, and I think that you are the perfect person to close out our conference. So with the last 4 minutes that I have, what is something that you want everybody that's watching right now to know before we sign off today?
Here's the deal, and this is it. This is bedrock. There's nothing under this statement. I have drilled all the way down. And here's the overarching message of everything that I do on my show, my books, everything. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. And we mistakenly pursue happiness, which I don't think is a very worthy goal of us. Happiness is elusive and it's conditional. Healthiness is intentional. We're never going to feel better about the things that we have to deal with. My wife suffers, and she suffers greatly. And it's hard to watch somebody suffer. It's hard to watch somebody go through anguish like she has to do. Now, she's a pretty good sport. She's got a great attitude, but her life is hard. She's never going to feel better about this. I'm never going to feel better about this, but that's not the goal. The goal is to be better, to be healthier. I am no good to her if I'm a bitter, mean, broke, frustrated guy. So my goal is to be as healthy as I possibly can, financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I gave up grammatically because, I'm a product of South Carolina's public school education. That ain't going to happen. But, that was funny. The healthier I become, the better off she is. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. So my question to you today, and I don't care what you did last week. You may have eaten a box load of Krispy Kreme donuts. One of the landmines for caregivers is excessive weight gain. I know I gained a lot of weight. I got so big, it took 2 dogs to bark at me. I was leaving footprints in dry concrete. I broke my family tree. I mean, my nickname was Dang. We get that way. I get it. But it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. Today's a great day to start being healthier. You can make one intentional decision. I will sit and be still. I will read 2 pages of a book. I will needlepoint. I will play the piano. I will do something intentional. I will put down this Snickers bar and pick up an apple. Whatever it is, do something intentionally healthy on multiple levels for you today. You have not only the permission to do it, you have the imperative to do it. You have the mandate to do it because you're no good to them if you put every part of the healthy part, your healthiness on hold. You're no good to them, and you're no good to yourself. You are doing something extraordinary. You are volunteering to put yourself between a vulnerable loved one and even worse disaster. That's extraordinary. Well done. We judge ourselves by our performance record without mercy. I probably went over time, but I'm going to leave you this last point. We caregivers judge ourselves without mercy over our failures and our performance record. And if you're going to do that, then I'm going to ask you something. Will you at least be fair and judge yourself by your attendance record, which is perfect because you keep showing up? I don't care how bloody you are, how beat up you are, how much you're swearing under your breath, you keep showing up. And that's extraordinary. And that individual who keeps showing up deserves to have a little bit more calmness, healthiness, and dare I say it, even more joy. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. I think I speak on behalf of everyone on the Caregiver Coalition. We are so grateful that you were here today, and there's a lot of thank yous in the chat. If you want to take a look at the chat before you sign off.
Now you're asking me to multitask
is
here,
there?
Candace.
Do what?
You're asking me to multitask here.
Well, just if you get the chance. But going ahead and closing us out today, thank you again, Peter. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Linda Levin. She's the CEO of Elder Source. She's going to close us out today.
Thanks, Candace. And Peter, thank you. I got to hear your presentation. It really was very beautiful and inspiring. Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers for today. What a wonderful conference. So many people were able to benefit from your presentations and what you had to offer. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you to all of you who took the time today to participate, not only in Northeast Florida, but from across Florida, and even some from outside of Florida. This was a wonderful day for everybody, and thank you all for participating. There will be a follow-up email next week sharing the recordings of each session and all the resources that the speakers shared during their presentations. So continue to take care of yourselves, stay well, have a good weekend, and thank you again. Bye-bye.